How do we put ourselves second in the equation? How do we think of ourselves less and stop focusing on ourselves and start focusing on other people? How do we do that? Well, we try really, really hard. And what we need to do is we need to put together a list of people that we're going to bless, and we need to put a list together of how we're going to bless them and what we're going to do and what we're going to bless them with. And then we need to go out there and work really, really hard to be a blessing to those people. Are you buying that? Good. Good. We are learning. That ain't going to work. That is not going to work. Why? Why won't that work? Surely that's a good plan, Christopher. You put a 12-step program in place and you follow the plan, right? That's how it works. Nope, that ain't going to work. Why won't it work? Because we are fighting against something deep, something that's intrinsic to what we are. We're fighting against what's called the sin nature, the flesh, as it says in the Bible. There is something about us that is twisted and distorted towards ourselves. And so when we're trying to do this, helping other people and working hard and stumping up the courage to help other people and be a blessing to other people out of our own strength and out of our own energy, by our own will, we will inevitably fail because we will run out of steam because you are fighting something that is impossible for you to overcome by the flesh. The flesh cannot overcome the flesh by the power of the flesh, right? It doesn't work like that. If you could, if that was possible, we wouldn't need Jesus. You could just stump up yourself the courage and the motivation and just overcome your own sin. No problem, done deal. But the flesh cannot overcome the flesh. You cannot stump up enough energy or enough willpower to overcome that flesh in yourself. What will inevitably start happening is you will fail and you'll go, oh, what a sinful, horrible, disgusting worm that I am, and you will be forever ashamed and you will never get up again. You'll try and then you'll fail. And then you'll try and you'll fail. And you'll pick yourself up and dust yourself off. And you'll try and you'll try. And then you fail. And eventually you stop trying. And it'll be, oh, woe is me, I am a worm. I am totally so self-absorbed and so beyond saving that I can't possibly do any of this stuff. And then you'll be out the back door, back down to the pub or whatever it is you're doing. That's not going to work. Or the other side of that equation is that you go, ha-ha, look at all these wonderful people that I have saved and I have blessed by my wonderful character and all these wonderful things that I've done. And look at this person, that I rescued that person out of the depths of hell by my own power. And I've stood them up and look at them now and look at how they're going. Isn't that great? And what a wonderful work I did by that person, by my strength and by my might. And look at all these other people that I have blessed and look at it and celebrate it all. And suddenly you become self-righteous. You become self-righteous because that's what the flesh does. Oh, look at me. Aren't I great? Or, oh, look at me. Aren't I disgusting? So whether it's, oh, look at me, aren't I great? Or, oh, look at me, aren't I disgusting? Guess what it is? Oh, look at me. The flesh cannot overcome the flesh by the power of the flesh. It just doesn't work like that. So what hope is there for us then? It's only as we look to Christ. It's only as we look to Christ that we can be set free from this predicament. It's only as we look to Christ. How does looking at Jesus, how does seeing Jesus transform us? Have a look at verses 1 and 2 again. Those things, it says there, any love, comfort, compassion, sharing in the Spirit, tenderness, joy, all flowing from Christ. Have this same mind in you. Now look at that. Make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one in the spirit of mind. Do nothing out of selfish do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own self-interest, but each of you the interests of the others. Anyone got an ESV there? No. ESV, yep. I've picked up an NIV here. in the ESV, it translates it as have the same mind of you which you have in Christ. Which is yours. There are. Yep. So that's ESV, which is yours in Christ Jesus. It's in other words, it's already yours. Isn't that interesting? Have this same mind among you that is yours in Christ Jesus. In other words, this mind is already ours and it's available to us if only we would operate out of that. In Romans chapter 8, Paul calls it being led by the flesh or led by the Spirit. To be led by the flesh is death. To be led by the Spirit is life and joy. It's only as we look to Christ, the resources that are available in Christ. He was exalted and then he became one of us. He stepped low to reach down to us. He was exalted, but then he humbled himself. So he's an example to us then. Well, yes, he is an example, but so much more than an example. He takes our place. He enters our predicament to free us. He was humbled for us that we could be exalted in him. He was brought low so that we could be lifted high. He poured himself out that we could be filled with the Spirit. He poured himself out that we could be filled with the Spirit. And it's the Spirit of God that mediates God's love to us. He emptied himself so we could be filled. And so that we could know the love of God in Christ Jesus, which surpasses all understanding. Knowing the context, knowing our story, knowing all of these things, we can allow ourselves to be humble now, knowing that we are already exalted in Christ, and there is coming a day when we will find our exalted station when Christ returns. It is already guaranteed and promised to us. It is a reality that we are moving towards, and so we can afford to be humble now. We can lose now in order to win later. The battle is over, and the triumph is secure. The victory is assured. It's already ours in Christ Jesus. And so we can be humble now because we know what we are already exalted in Christ. We don't have to win now because we already know that the battle is won in Christ and the victory is ours. We can lose well, in fact, knowing that we have already won all there is to win in Christ Jesus. We are already exalted in him. And so here's the rub, folks. Here's the rub. The true nature of the Christian faith isn't just believing in Christ. It isn't just believing the gospel. It is out of the overflow and implications of the gospel of Jesus Christ dying to yourself. It is putting to death the flesh and its deeds. And I know this from my own experience. I have been a believer 23 years, I guess. And in the last couple of years, the Lord has taken me from a place, last 5 years say, taken me from a place of believing and understanding the gospel to understanding that the journey of the Christian is to die to oneself. And this is the real journey. This is where it really gets real. This is where the rubber meets the road. Because so many of us sit in that place of believing but never seeing because we're still pursuing our own ends and what we think should be done and our own blessing and our own benefit and our own comfort out of our own control for our own ideals. And so churches split and people go their own separate ways because they're too self-interested in what they think as opposed to being others-focused and dying to self and pursuing Christ. Dying to self. Romans chapter 6, we spent a lot of time in there. Romans chapter 6. Romans chapter 12. Therefore, brethren, in light of the mercies of God, present yourself a what? a living sacrifice, dying daily. A living sacrifice, dying daily, picking up your cross daily and following Him, putting to death the deeds of the flesh and following Jesus, being led by the Spirit with our eyes on Christ, our lives outward focused, and our hearts full of the Spirit of God who mediates the love of God to us, sacrificial in every aspect, and calling us to a life beyond ourselves, to the life of service to God and to others. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Outwork the reality and the implications of the gospel with fear and trembling, because it's going to come at a cost. My old mentor, Michael Green, used to say to me, when you enter the Christian faith, there is no joining fee. Your sign-up is free. To become part of the club, pay no money, but the yearly subscription will cost you everything. Jesus gave His life for us. It is now for us to give our lives to Him in return. It's a life-for-life deal. Nothing else will suffice. Everything else is a Clayton's gospel. Everything else is a cheap imitation. Die to self, live to God. It's only as we see Christ and His sacrifice for us that we can understand the costly love of God. It's only as we see Christ that we see the costly love and sacrifice of God. It's only as we trust and rest in Christ that we come to know our new identity as blood-bought sons and daughters of the living God that comes through Jesus Christ. Then we need not fear losing our acceptance, our standing, our position, our credibility, or honor before the Father. It is guaranteed to us in the Son. Only as we trust and rest in Christ's sacrifice will we see the love and security that we have with God, and that nothing in all creation can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Only as we put our trust and rest in Christ can we put others before ourselves, knowing that we have nothing to lose, and what we stand to gain is them.